Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I'm going to be doing a review / discussion video on the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. The first part of this video is going to be spoiler free, and then the second part will contain spoilers, but I will tell you when that's going to happen before it happens, so you don't have to worry about being spoiled in this video. So this book is an adult murder mystery story that is set at a masquerade party in, I think, the early 1900s, and at the end of this masquerade party, Evelyn Hardcastle is murdered. So we're following our main character called Aidan Bishop, and he has to relive this day over and over and over again until he solves her murder. But the twist is that every single day he wakes up in the body of a different guest. So I really enjoyed this book, and I'm not surprised at all because it's been compared to Agatha Christie and Clue, which are two of my favorite things, so I had very high expectations going into this, and it definitely delivered. So the first thing I noticed about this book was the writing, which I loved. At times it felt almost like I was reading a classic, which might just be because it did remind me a lot of Agatha Christie, but I also just feel like the phrasing or the word choices that the author used just reminded me of an older book, and I really enjoyed that, but at the same time I didn't ever have a difficult time understanding it like I usually would with the writing of a classic book. But I would say that the best thing about this book is definitely the story. The synopsis that you read on the back, which is also what I told you at the beginning of this video, does not even scratch the surface to how complex this story is. And as much as I do really love the plot of this story and just the story overall, I will say that it's very mentally draining to read just because we're following such a big cast of characters that you have to keep straight in your head, and also because as we're following Aidan Bishop waking up in all of these different characters, we kind of stumble upon many different timelines and like storylines sort of that you have to keep straight in your head also. So it's just kind of a lot, and it can be a bit mentally draining at times. Like, I don't think that this is a book that you can really read while you're reading other books, because I usually can like read multiple books at one time and keep all of those storylines straight in my head, whereas with this book it already felt like I was reading like 5 different books, so I just don't think I'd be able to read this and read something else at the same time. But again, I don't mean that in like a bad way. I still super duper enjoyed this book. It's just that it is quite a lot. I'm honestly so impressed with the story and how the author was able to keep everything straight in his head. Like, props to him for that. My copy actually had a little Q&A with the author in the back, and he happened to mention that anytime he would edit this book and like take any little detail out, it was so interwoven together that even if he took a detail out, it would have like a butterfly effect on the whole book, and he would have to change so many things. So props to him for being able to weave this story together like he did and be able to have it all make sense. So it's Hannah from the future here, and while I was editing this video, I realized that I didn't really elaborate much on what it was about the plot or the story that I actually liked about it, rather than just saying that I liked it and that it was complex. So I thought I would just jump in here and kind of explain that to you. So just to do it really quickly, basically what I loved about this story was, one, that it was very unique, but also that it was really fun to read, which I know might seem a little bit contradictory to the fact that I said that it was mentally draining at times, but I feel like it can be both of those things at the same time. I mentioned several times in this video that this book has been compared to Clue, and though I have not seen the film, I really should because I think I'd love it. I have played and loved the game Clue, and this book honestly felt like reading a game of Clue, because it's set on this huge estate with, you know, the library and the boathouse and like all of these different locations, and then you've got this huge cast of characters and you're just going along trying to figure out what's going on. It really is kind of fun, and it feels like you're almost playing a game of Clue while you are reading this book. So that is essentially why I really enjoyed the plot, even though it was kind of complex and a lot at times and a little bit mentally draining. It also was a lot of fun while reading it, and it kept me hooked the entire time. So I just wanted to tell you that. Now we can jump back into the video. As far as the characters in this book, I did really like having a big cast of characters, and one thing that I do want to mention is that at the beginning of this book there's actually a copy of the invitation for the masquerade ball. And in this invitation, it says the Hardcastle family, so their names, their son, their daughter, and then it lists the notable guests, so all of their names and their professions, and then the principal household staff, so it lists all of them and what they do as well. So even though there were a lot of characters and sometimes it was hard to remember who everyone was, when I was a little confused, I could refer back to this invitation at the beginning and it would explain who they were. And I really appreciated that because I know some people will like actually write these out themselves whenever they're reading a book with a lot of characters, but I'm way too lazy to do that. Like, I'd rather just read it and be confused than take the time to do that, which sounds like really stupid, but that's just the way I am. So I really appreciated that this book did it for me. Now, I'm obviously not going to talk about spoilers right now, but I did want to touch on the ending just because with mystery stories, the ending can really make or break a book. And frankly, I'm still not really sure what I think about the ending. It wasn't what I expected it to be, but also I don't really know what I expected it to be because this book genuinely left me stumped throughout the whole thing. So at the end, I was just like, I don't know what to expect, and then it happened, and I was like, well, I don't know how to feel, so that's nice. There are essentially two mysteries in this book. I'm gonna put the book down because you know what I'm talking about. I don't feel like I have to hold it up the whole time. But there are essentially two mysteries overarching the whole story that we're following. The first one is who killed Evelyn Hardcastle, obviously, and then the second mystery is like, why is this guy repeating the same day over and over again? As far as who the killer was, like I said, I was pretty stumped throughout the entire time reading it, and I really didn't know who it was going to be when it was finally revealed, but I did have a prediction throughout it, simply because usually it's the least likely person, so I just picked out who to me seemed like the least likely person, and that was who it ended up being, but that's not because of clues that were laid out for me to figure it out. It was just because I've read a lot of mysteries and usually that's who it is. So this leads me into my first little issue with this book, in that I usually like to be able to like solve the mystery with our main character as we're going through the story and the clues are kind of being laid out for us, or when the killer, or like I say killer, but like whatever the mystery is, when it's revealed at the end, I like to be able to look back and see, oh, that's how all of the pieces fit together, and then that's how it was revealed. Whereas with this book, I feel like our main character had to really spell it out for us in the end, and like he made connections that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to make if he hadn't told you. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's just something that I thought could have been a little bit better, or at least that's just how I don't prefer to read my mysteries that way. I like to be able to solve it or be able to look back and see how I could have solved it. And as far as the second mystery as to why Aiden is repeating the same day over and over again, I actually really liked that reveal of what that was, and I didn't predict it at all, but I don't feel like it was explored enough, and it left me with a lot of questions, which I will touch in the spoilery part of this video. But yeah, I liked it, but at the same time, it was a little bit too open-ended, so I wish it would have just been explored more and answered more of my questions. At the end of the day, I really enjoyed this book and I don't have a lot of issues with it. I would say my biggest issue is probably that I was a little bit confused at times keeping the characters and the storylines and the timelines straight in my head, and I feel like because of that I wasn't able to like truly appreciate the story. Like, the best way I can describe this book is that if it was a movie, it would be that kind of movie that you have to watch at least twice in order to see all of the connections and the details put into it, and that's a lot easier to do with a film because you can watch that in a couple of hours, whereas for me at least, I'm already not much of a rereader, but it would take me days to reread this book, so that's a little bit of a bummer because I feel like I'm never going to be able to fully appreciate this story unless I do read it twice, like boom boom right after the other. So yeah, or I would really love if it was turned into a very accurate adaptation. That would be very nice also. We got a big cast of characters in here. You could get a lot of good actors in this movie. Just putting that out there. Overall, I really enjoyed this book despite its couple of flaws, and I would totally recommend it to anybody who loves mysteries or Agatha Christie or Clue because those are genuinely really accurate comparisons to this. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and that will be all for my spoiler-free part of this video. So if you are concerned about being spoiled, then I would click out of this video now. So now that you've stuck around, let's jump into the spoilers. I don't have a lot of them, honestly, because at this point it's been a couple of weeks since I read this book, and I probably definitely should have filmed this video closer to right after I read it, because y'all know my memory is bad with books. So I've got a couple of little points that I wrote down. Hopefully I can elaborate on them well. The first one I wanted to talk about was actually a character that I probably could have mentioned in the non-spoilery part, but I feel like it would have just been weird to mention it and not, like, elaborate on it, and in that case it would have been spoilery, too much information. So that is the Plague Doctor character. So when Aidan Bishop wakes up as his first host, or whatever you want to call it, he runs into a character dressed in a Plague Doctor costume, which I just thought, Plague Doctors are super creepy, so I thought it added like a great kind of spooky element to an already kind of spooky story and setting. Also, let's talk about the setting a little bit. Like, it's set on this old estate that has a family graveyard on it, which is just a grand idea that I've never been to a place that had a graveyard on it. At least not that I know of. I mean, there's probably plenty of dead people buried around here. So I really liked that Plague Doctor character. Not that I necessarily liked his, like, I don't think he was a particularly likable character, but I liked what his character brought to the table. And I feel like that character introduction was where the story branched out into all of these other possibilities, and we're suddenly introduced to the fact that this is like maybe some kind of game, and then we're introduced to the other players, so to speak. So there is this other girl called Anna who is like Aidan, and she is reliving the same day over and over again and trying to figure out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. And then we know that there's at least one other person that is doing the same thing. And I have to say, I was probably more interested and invested in that mystery than who actually killed her. Like, I just wanted to know what was going on with these people, because I also really like game kind of things happening in thrillers or mysteries. I think that they're a lot of fun, so I liked that that element was brought into this story. Another thing I liked about Aidan and Anna's interactions with each other is that they kept running, they were like trying to help each other solve the mystery, but they kept running into each other out of order, like not in the right timeline. And so they had a book, I think Aidan had the, I can't remember who wrote everything down, if it was Aidan or Anna, but anyways, one of them wrote down like all of the events that happened in the right timeline in this book so that they would be able to keep up with each other. Like, that doesn't really make sense, but if you read the book you will understand. But that whole thing really reminded me of Doctor Who and River Song, because the Doctor and River kept running into each other not in the right timeline, and so River had a book where she would write down everything that happened so that they, when they met, they could say like, has this happened yet? No, so this is the part of the timeline we're in. And that was just, it was very similar, and I love Doctor Who, so I really enjoyed that similarity. So then the ending happened and the killer was revealed, and like I said earlier in the video, I did sort of predict who the killer was just based off of who the least likely person was, and I feel for some people the least likely person would have been Aidan, because obviously I feel like if you're trying to solve the murder, it would have been a cool twist if you were the murderer. But the other least likely person is, like, in any murder mystery, like, the last person to be a suspect is the person who got killed. And so that was what I was thinking, was that it was Evelyn Hardcastle. So I did predict that it was her, but I didn't predict the way that she did it. So I thought that she, like, faked her death just because of the way that, like, her body was, like, taken out really quickly. So I thought it was just like a little switcheroo fake thing. But it ended up being that it wasn't Evelyn Hardcastle the whole time, it was somebody posing as her, and she was trying to fake her death, but then the real Evelyn Hardcastle ended up killing her. At least I think that's what happened. Again, I was a little bit hazy when it came to this whole part of the story, and I'm still a little bit fuzzy on some things, even more so now because it's been a while since I read the book. And by a while, I mean like 2 weeks, but that's long enough for me to forget everything, so yeah. And we also had the reveal of why Aidan was repeating the same day over and over again, and I think that actually might have been revealed first. So the Plague Doctor ends up explaining this to him by taking his mask off, and he basically, what I got from it, that whole thing, was that it's like a prison, and when people, like, for instance, murderers murder somebody, then they're sent to relive this day over and over again and solve somebody else's crime. So I actually thought that that was really interesting, but like I said earlier, I felt like it left me with a lot of questions. So the deal with Aidan was actually that he wasn't a murderer or anything. It was that Anna killed his sister, I think, and so he went into this, whatever you want to call it, game or whatever, to like finish her off once and for all, but when he got into it, his memory was wiped. So the only way that he really remembers this is from what the plague doctor is telling him. And within this time, he like bonded with Anna, so at the end of the story, he like forgives her and thinks that she's a better person now. And I have to say, I don't know how I feel about that. Because like, this person, this Anna person, murdered your sister, I'm pretty sure. And like, yeah, you can't remember it, but also like, I just don't know if I liked that she had a redemption arc in the end. Which, even though we didn't see her murder this person, and all that we know of Anna is the same that Aiden knows, and she seems fine in the thing, but like I just don't know how I like that idea. So yeah. I still just wish that he would have elaborated on that whole idea of like people going to this kind of prison. Like, maybe this was answered in the book and I just missed it, but like, if they solve the murder, do they get to leave? Or like, is their like memory wiped so that they seem like they're an okay person? Also, in what era does this book actually take place in? Because we know the story takes place in like the early 1900s approximately. So is that when it actually takes place and there's just some kind of supernatural thing where people end up repeating the same days somewhere else? Or is it like this book actually takes place way in the future where we have some kind of technology like virtual reality or something like that to make people go back to these different places and relive the same day and solve this murder? Like, I just thought the idea was so interesting and I wanted to learn all about it, and I didn't feel like any of those questions were answered. And also, can we just agree that it was such an open ending? Like, what happened to Aiden and Anna after that? Did they stay in that world time period, or did they like go back to where they were before? Like, what's going on? So yeah, I know in this spoiler section it honestly sounded like I hated the book, but I swear I actually really liked it. I just wanted all of my questions answered at the end. I kind of really wish that he would write a sequel because I think that he could do some really cool things with it. So I think I'm just going to wrap the video up here because I'll be honest, I am sweating so bad because whenever I film I have to turn my air conditioner off because it's just way too noisy in the background, and it is real hot in here. So I'm gonna end the video here. I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you read this book, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of it. I'd love to discuss it with you in the comments. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?